So, for a quick, just to start out, so we can have proper framing and context, we're going to talk about how we find truth, what is truth, and go from there. And ultimately, at the end of the day, is about finding enough truth to basically move through the world. And why values actually matter more than absolute truth, right? I know that sounds a little crazy right now, but trust me, we're gonna get to it. Okay. So you hear this a lot is like, I just want the facts, right? If you watched Dragnet back in the day, like I did on Nick at Night, or, you Joe Friday, just the facts, man, that kind of stuff. You always say, oh, it's got to be factually based. It's got to be factually based. The thing about facts, though, facts does not mean it is absolutely 100% true, right? What a fact is, it can be proven true or false, right? That's it. That is the bare bones definition of a fact. A fact-based statement is, can it be verified to be true or false? It has to be, like, in simple definitions, it has to be falsifiable, right? So there's a differences between statements of facts and statements of opinion, right? I like chocolate ice cream is an opinion, right? That can't be really, like, proven true or false, right? Or chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream. It's an opinion, right? But you guys saying Frederic said he likes chocolate ice cream on a live on Substack, that's a statement of fact. You can back it up. You can show clips. You can do this. You can say, hey, here it is. He said it, X, Y, and Z, right? So it's important to know, like, what that means is we have to have an understanding of the outside world and about ourselves in that world, right? So when you have the Trump regime come out and they start claiming that, you know, these the Democrats control weather machines, or, they no, they, like, Christine Ohm says, well, they were the ones that cut funding on FEMA, or they cut funding on, National Weather Service or NOAA. You can go back and verify that, right? You can say, well, actually, no, here's the congressional record. Here's where, Republicans, here's the big, beautiful bill. Here's where you guys cut funding for upgrades. You cut funding for NOAA. You cut funding. So that's basically disproving a statement of fact that she made, right? It's falsifiable, right? Now, her motives, we don't, if you're really getting esoteric about it, you could say, did she say that because she's stupid? Or is there malicious intent, right? That kind of stuff. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but this is important. I promise you, because for what's coming next this is why I'm getting to why you cannot trust anything Republicans say, especially Trump Republicans, no matter what. They basically lost all credulity. Okay. So why we want to live in a fact-based world is because, with our limited understanding, basically our evolved chimp brains, that, with our limited senses, our limited sort of perception that can be often wrong, that we're trying to make sense of this, right? So we want as much factual information that we can verify as possible in order to make sense of the world, right? Um, and it's helpful that you kind of go through the world with that in mind, right? I mean, we make assumptions all the time based on things that aren't necessarily accurate, or, like, accurate in terms of reality, right? You talk to somebody on the phone and you think, like, maybe they're a little tense, or maybe you had a meeting and it's like, like, you met a friend for a coffee and they're distracted and you think, man, are they mad at me? Like, did I do something? And then you ask them and it turns out, no, it's actually something else going on in their lives. Like they had a bad day at work, or it was something with their family, but your own sort of insecurities, or your own sort of your own preconceptions made it about you. Right. That's a very common thing. Now, what does this really have to do with politics and how we get through the world? Right. So when you're engaging with people or systems or organizations, it's important to really understand whether they're acting in good faith, right? Trumpers, a lot of entities online, they could be bots, they could be whatever, right? Are not they don't act in good faith anymore, because the Republicans, especially MAGA, they have left the fact-based world. It's just propaganda. It's just spin, and it's for a purpose. This actually goes all the way back to George W. Bush, and even before that. I could spend a whole thing on, you might have heard me talk about it when I'm done other lives. There was a guy named Lee Atwater, um, back in the day, and he created with Nixon what was called the Southern Strategy, right? So Stuart Stevens has a book about this, where the Republican Party basically went from uh, the Black Party, for Black folks, going all the way back to Lincoln, and more Northern Party, and shifted over to the white racist party, right? Um, so Southern Strategy was basically like, hey, these working class whites in the South feel disenfranchised because of civil rights. We're going to try to pick them up. So we're going to inflame racial hatred. And you're still seeing that playbook play out today, right? Except it's switched over from, because being out and out racist for a while against Black folks was verboten. Like, it was really bad. It wasn't done in polite society. But hating on undocumented immigrants, i.e., calling them illegal aliens, otherizing them, was fine. And you're seeing this sort of play out with Abrigo Garcia. You're seeing this with ICE, with Alligator Auschwitz, all that stuff, right? Now it's kind of swung back around, because the far right has come in and picked up, like, hating on Black folks again, which they never really gave up on. That's where like, I can't remember what was trying to be vogue for a little bit a couple months ago, where it was just like Black fatigue or something like that. It was some ridiculous thing. But today, what dropped on social media was Ann Coulter posted on social media, just to get a bunch of attention, because this is what these provocateurs do, and that's why I'm talking about it, is we didn't kill enough Indians. Now, this statement was crafted very cleverly, and it was for effect, because we don't refer to Native Americans as Indians anymore, because it's offensive, and it was basically, steeped in colonialism, right? They were Native Americans. The reason they were called Indians is because Christopher Columbus thought that in Spanish explorer, like, Christopher Columbus thought he'd found the route to India, because in his day and age, when they knew the world was round, right? But they had estimated the globe to be, I think, about a third smaller than they thought it would be. And so when he hit, I think what's now Cuba, I think they call it. When he hit Cuba, he thought he'd reach the outer islands of India in the subcontinent. So he thought, oh yeah, we're okay, we're right where we're supposed to be. But that's not where he was. It wasn't until Amerigo Vespucci, said, hey, this is a whole new place, and thus we have North America and South America, not North Columbia and South Columbia. That's why the names are there. right? Um, so why did Ann Coulter say this? Well, because one, it's provocative. It'll get her name out there. She hadn't been really a fixture in the hate movement for a while. So she decided to say it. And it was done for effect. It was done to make people highly upset, to be highly offensive, and to be provocative. Now, does any of that is there any truth to that statement? You know, that's a whole other question. That's the thing though. She's not concerned with truth. She's concerned with being a provocateur. She's concerned with pissing you off and getting attention. And all the little MAGAs that come online, that's exactly what they're concerned with. That's why I don't really bother to argue with MAGA folks anymore. Because if they're not bots, right? Hey, what's up, Jason? If they're not bots, then all they want is, quote, liberal tears and to get a reaction. They're not worth arguing. They're not. Because again, in order to have a good faith actor, right? When we're talking about differences in something, if you have a good faith actor, a discussion or debate is designed to two people to parse something out to get at reality. What is reality? When was the last time we actually even saw that in politics in America? And it's fine to strongly advocate for your position, and bias is going to creep into it. But when was the last time that you actually saw really a good faith debate? And I'm saying this so you know which party actually engages in good faith. All too often, which would be the Democrats. I'm not saying that they're, you know, um, perfect and, amazing people, right? But when was the last time a Republican engaged in a good faith debate or engaged in a good faith exercise to get at the truth? I can't remember it. I really can't, you know. And that's also part of this problem we have. Why we never seem to address actual problems is because you have one side that is constantly engaged in being a provocateur and being basically just horrible. And that's on purpose because that happened during George W. Bush's time in office. There was a presidential aide. This was back in '03, and this is when we were talking about the lead up for the war in Iraq, right? And so I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I got a text, so no, but so the to lead up in the war in Iraq, a presidential aide, unfortunately, they never identified the guy, you know, said about Iraq that Republicans were creating their own realities. And while he said, you, as in the media, live in the fact based world. And we create this reality. And then while you're chasing that reality and tearing it down and, debunking it, we've already moved on and created another reality. And then you're going to chase that. And while you're chasing that, we're moving on and creating another reality. Kind of sounds how the Trump regime operates, doesn't it? Except on steroids. This isn't something new, right? And so what gave this a shot in the arm was social media. Now, the only thing you can really do for this is that there's a few steps that you can kind of combat this, right? It's going to sound counterintuitive, but it's really not. So how do we get out of this trap of basically chasing the white rabbit, right? Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're Alice. We're going down the hole. We're chasing the white rabbit, constantly after it, thinking that if we ever grab the white rabbit, if we ever catch the Republicans in such a big enough lie that they're going to scream uncle and go and throw up their hands and go, oh, you got us. Yeah, we've been lying this whole time and you're right. We're going to change and we're going to do better. No, that's never going to come. Never. Not even from their supporters, not even people in their cult, right? It's just not going to happen because that's not how human nature works, you know? So what these Republicans are creating and why they can so brazenly lie is because they are not interested in truth. They're not. Period. Not at all. What they're interested in is advocating their agenda. And their agenda is purely for power and wealth by any means necessary. That's it. While you do have some of that on the other side for the Democrats, like you have the corporatist Democrats, that are still attracted to big money, or the billionaire class, and they're very much self-serving. I mean, most human beings, I would say damn near all human beings are self-serving in one way, shape, or form. It's really about, you know, whether you sort of understand that and you check it when possible, right? That's the difference. So these people have no interest in checking that, nor do they think there's anything wrong with it. They've, at this point, normalized it. They have self-rationalized it. So what that means for us is, one, right? You will never have a good faith debate with these people, right? It's not going to happen. And two, if you're trying to, quote, get MAGAs to come back, they have to be ready to come back to the fact-based world. But you're probably saying to me right now, like, well, Fred, that's all well and good, man, but like, what do I need to do with this? Like, how do I keep up? Because the fire hose of news is just so much. There's so much crap, and it's done that way for a purpose. Like, it's called flooding the zone, right? It is designed to disorient you. It is designed for you to it's basically just, it floods you with this disinformation to where there's so much. If you try to knock it all down, you're not going to be able to do it, right? So here's the thing. One, it's not incumbent upon you to knock down every single point, right? It's just, you don't have to. So if you find yourself engaging with someone, right, there's two ways you need to go about this. Or you're engaging with disinformation, or you're engaging yourself with a bad faith actor, and you're having trouble just kind of disengaging. Okay. One, always come from a place of your values whenever you're talking with any of this, right? Because you have to remember, essentially what you're having as a conversation with these folks is a difference in values, right? Truth does matter if that's one of your values, right? But what you're essentially talking about is your values, okay? So let's go to the big, beautiful bill. Let's go to the floods in Texas, right? So we're talking about did the cuts to NOAA and the National Weather Service exacerbate this? Well, the evidence is in, yes, they did. Was it the sole cause for this? That's hard to say. But they did exacerbate this problem. People died because of this, right? So I'm one of these people that, well, we have to pay for these things because that is part of our survival, especially in a world that is struggling with man-made climate change, right? So we had these systems in place for a reason. Our, grandparents put them in there for a reason, right? We've shown with fact-based evidence that they're there for a reason. We need to fund them, right? Now, Trumpers are going to come back at you and say, well, Trump had to do this because of Biden. It's like, no, he didn't. So the thing is, you don't have to engage with that. You can engage with it pretty quickly and say, well, no, he gave tax cuts to billionaires. So no, he didn't. He didn't need to do this. Or why is always we have to cut? Why can't we ever raise revenue in the form of raising taxes for people that are more than capable of paying it? Right? You know. But if you really want to get them, come back to this central point, right? They're going to try to pull you off this. And you can say, if you really want to engage in that, you really want to, there it is, Trudy. The government is there to do things we cannot do alone ourselves, right? There are things that we need to do that are costs in order for us to have a functioning society. Why do you think the Postal Service is in the Constitution? Every functioning society, empire, successful country has had a postal service. All of them. It was one of the first things Genghis Khan put in place when the Mongols decided to actually rule over their empire and have an administrative state instead of just being raiders. They made a postal service. So did the Romans. All of them did. When you move from a nomadic culture and you become more of a agriculturally sedentary civilization, right? That's how you spread information. That's how you communicate, with somebody who's literally not standing right next to you is the Postal Service. That's why it's in the Constitution. Okay. You can extrapolate that out and say, we need to know about weather. NOAA, National Weather Service. We need these things. We need clean drinking water. So now you start getting into, so that's when you start getting into, all these other things, right? Infrastructure, whether it's hard or soft, blah, blah, right? But the other part of it is too, if these people are not engaging in good faith argument, man, you at some point you just simply walk away, right? I think I saw something from Walter Reen today where somebody was saying is like somebody made the point of like, well, maybe Trump is the tyrant we need. It's like, I don't want a tyrant. I want a democracy. If we can't agree on that, we can't have a discussion. There's no point in continuing. That's where your values come into play. Right? I would not so J.K. Rowling, I would not engage in a good faith discussion with her because she's a bigot. And that's what I tell her to her face. You're a bigot. Well, trans people no, you're a bigot. I can't engage in a good faith until you if we can't start from a place where you admit trans people are people and deserving of rights and visibility and we're talking civil rights, visibility in society, their own spot, to be able to self-express. I can't engage in a good faith argument with you. We can't even start on a foundation. There's no point in continuing. None. And it is okay for you at that point to walk away. That's it. You can say the same thing about misogynists with women, right? If we cannot agree on a foundation that women are people deserving of basic dignity and basic human rights, we can't even start the discussion because I'm not going to entertain because all I will do is spend this energy, right? Trying to convince this person of something that is a value to me. and they're going to not agree with it. Period. It is okay for you to say that makes you a horrible person. And I'm just not going to engage with that. You're not obligated to argue them to being a better person. In fact, you may not be able to. Most of the time with human beings, you can't. You just can't. At best, here's the thing. If someone is not open to changing their mind, they won't. Period. Best you can do is plant a seed that maybe takes root and blooms later. That's it. That's the best you can do. That's not part of your obligation as a citizen, is to go and try to go at the bigots and the scum. It's not. All you're going to do is drive yourself crazy. You know, that's it. You know, so like, so that's the thing, right? This is how you arrive at truth. Okay. Is one, what are your values and where do they stem from? That's one of the things you can do, right? I used to be a conservative Christian, sort of, depending on where you come from, you know. Like most human beings, I was a mishmash of different ideas, different things. Most people do not have, you know, like most people do not have this, um, a coherent set of views. It's not a party platform. You know, that's not how most people come. Most people, we're we get ours from our parents, culture, community, school, like geographic area, you name it. We're a mismatch of all kinds of other stuff. And most people, for their value system is, they're unexamined, right? So the thing about it is like, you want to examine those beliefs. And does that fit with, you know, like basically reality? Are you adhering to a fact-based world? And if you are, to the best of your ability, then when you approach something pushing on to that, right, then you can pretty much know that you're close to being on the correct path, right? So when Ann Coulter does say something like, you know, we should have killed more Indians, you can look at that and go, oh, you just want attention today, right? You just want to stir people up. You just want to say some bigoted stuff. That's absolute it's freaking horrible. You know, I don't have to sit there and go, well, no, the Trail of Tears was this. And, don't you understand about the reservations? Like, she knows all that. She doesn't care. That's not her point. Right. Now that's just sort of provocateurism. There's a flip side to this too. Okay. And we're seeing this. This is why I put this in the name with the Epstein files. This is the okie doke. This is the gaslighting. Right. So this is where they tell you, you say, hey, is there a client list for Epstein? You said there was. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. We clearly have video evidence of Pam Bondi saying it was on her desk. No, I didn't. There's no client list. Well, you said that. Trump does this all the time, right? Media never calls him on it. Hey, well, Trump, you said this, right? Yeah, and it's no, I didn't. I didn't say that. Like, I never would have said that. And there's evidence of him doing it, right? There it is. We're going to live through a lot of this. Like, it's pretty much going to be part of our reality for the next 3.5 years or however long, So what like what can you make about this? Right. One, you can point out where they're lying, right? And two, this is where you can start to really hammer in the inconsistencies. Because again, and they're easy to debunk, right? Why is was it what's her name? Giselle Maxwell, I think her name is. Why is she sitting in prison then? Well, they're you know, it's like, well, yeah, she sex trafficked women. For who? And we have testimony from women who say, "Oh, I met with this person." Right. Yeah. Now, was there a physical list? Just Lane. There you go. Thank you. Like, was there a physical list? Who knows? Maybe not. You know. That's a good point, Morgan. It's like, you know, it's like, and you could ask them like, "What do you plan to get out of this scam?" Or you can say, "Well, why did you say that back then? Why is it now? What was the point of that?" You know. So, is there an Epstein client list? I have no idea. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. You know, like, to be honest, would Epstein have a client list? I mean, most criminals don't write things down, at least you shouldn't, you know. However, he might have had contacts and a Rolodex, you know. Like, I'm sure there wasn't a list of like name, girls he's met, da da da. No, they wouldn't catalog it like that, but I definitely probably had, you know, like a list of people he's talked to, yeah, or a list of people that like attended his parties. There's flight logs and all that other stuff, right? And probably what Pam Bondi's doing is a lawyer's trick. So if she ever gets called in front of Congress, she said, well, no, he didn't have a list that had names of people because he ran a criminal organization, so he wouldn't have that. Mm. But that's not what we mean. And she knows that. She's being, what do they call it? Obtuse? Purposely disingenuous? Yeah. And it's not hard. It's not hard to figure out why. It's not hard to make what they call a valid inference. I remember I got in an argument with this one guy, like he just wouldn't have it. Um, where I said probably a reason that Elon Musk hated USAID so damn much was because USAID was instrumental in dismantling apartheid in South Africa. And Elon Musk loved him some apartheid. His family profited from it greatly. All his racial theories and his politics line up with apartheid South Africa. You know, so I made that inference, and this guy wouldn't have it. That's another way they come at you, which is, well, did he say those specific words? No, he didn't say those specific words that I love apartheid South Africa and that's why I hate USAID. No, most people don't do that. But I can take statements he said, right, about, you know, the AFD in Germany and, about the Holocaust denials and, white genocide and all these things, and he has specifically said USAID messed up his country and make an inference that's why Doge specifically targeted USAID. Oh, it's wasteful. No, it's not. It's an extension of anything. It's an extension of U.S. power. Now, I could be wrong, right? You know, I could be, he could be, in bed with Russia and dismantling USAID or China is absolutely one of their goals because that absolutely hurts American soft power, geopolitical power in the world. You know, I mean, that could come to light, and I would be happy to admit I was like, well, damn, I missed the mark on that one. I thought it was just bigotry. He wanted them emeralds back in his pockets, when he was a teenager. But that's what I'm saying is like you we're going to get a lot of things thrown at us, right? And anytime that you think that we're going to catch these people, they're going to wiggle out of it and they're going to do something else and they're going to move the goalpost and they're going to like do all these things. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Our goal is to not catch them in a lie and make them scream uncle. We know they're lying. We know that. What our goal is, what our purpose is to advance our values that we know are right and true and put them in the world. That's our goal. That's politics. You might have heard me say this, like sometimes I'll quote Marx, even though I'm not a Marxist. Marx said that in order for you to have a viable class, a political party, right? First, you have to recognize your own economic and political interests. And then you have to advocate in those interests. Without that, you're not practicing politics. Are you working class? Are you middle class? Like, see, a lot of these things they do to break us up, right? I'm not saying that there's no such thing as identity politics. What I'm saying is all politics are identity politics. All of them. That's a lie that they try to get you to back off of. What they're trying to do is get rid of your political power, right? Oh, you shouldn't vote. Identity politics is what ruined it, says the evangelical Christian who says, I vote as the Christian. Or rich people know exactly who they are. And they advocate in their own interest, their own economic interest all the time, unapologetically. That's why they hire lobbyists. That's why they spend all this money. They're trying to convince you that as a working person or a middle-class person that's trying to make mortgage, trying to make rent, trying to make car payments, trying to pay off credit cards, trying not to go further into credit card debt, trying to pay daycare. They're trying to convince you that you shouldn't advocate in your interest, in your identity. And unfortunately, if you're one of the oppressed class, whether you're a woman or an ethnic minority or whatever, right? That's another thing that you have to add onto it as well. Because we have bigotry, we have racism, we have patriarchy, we have all this other stuff, right? So, just because you have an economic interest and that you should have some economic class solidarity doesn't mean that you need to tell, Black folks, or you need to tell women, or you need to tell, trans folks or LGBTQ, whatever, Asian, Hispanic, all that. They have to deal with that too, that other identity. So that's why we ally with those folks with that identity and give them space to express that, or we tamp down bigotry and we fight those systems of oppression. Politics is about action, less so than truth. Truth is valuable, 100%. right? Because politics is simply the mechanism of which we make our society better. I don't know what better is. Like, but make it better. That's how we solve problems, right? You can't combat climate change if you discount the science, right? If you bury your head in the sand, or you know, you create this false propaganda so the rich and the corporations can get paid, you know. So the thing is, like, this is moving forward, right? This is the thing that's going to keep you from going nuts. Because if you're expecting truth to come out of this administration, or they get caught in a lie, it's not going to happen, right? They're going to get caught in a lie, and they're not going to care. And they're going to go to the next one, you know. But what's going to keep you sane is, what are your values, and are you advocating towards them? That's what's going to keep you sane. So, and are your values based in truth? You know, are they based in things like respect and justice and that kind of stuff? You know, so anyway, that's my soapbox speech. You know, I was just kind of thinking about that day. I was like, well, maybe I'll talk this through. You know, my brain, I woke up from a nap and my brain was just firing some stuff off. You know, might have been a rambling mess, and I apologize for it. You know, I could throw in a little extra thing called the second record. That's what historians have to deal with. So what the second record is it's the bias that creeps in from the historian to the record, right? Every historian has some kind of bias when they do their analysis, you know. Um, but it's whether you check that as much as you possibly can, right? Because history is not a completely factually, like, 100% true account of the past. You know, it's doing the best with what we can and what we know, right? Um, you know, my professor once said it's like, you know, taking the end of a dirty glass, looking through it into through a dirty glass pane into a room, and that's all you get, and you're trying to suss out what's in there, you know. So, yeah. But yeah, don't let this stuff get you down, right? Because you're gonna see a lot of people think, "Oh, we got Trump on the ropes." It's like, I think even, what was it, God, he's British, I forget his John, it's like, "We got him! We got him!" It's like, "No, we're not," "and we're not gonna get Trump until we get him." And that's just it, you know? That's like, so, yeah. How's my life going? I think Morgan asked about that. It's interesting, you know, my mom is in memory care. She's struggling with it, you know, and but we got her a little kitten who's about, I can think, 11 weeks now. So we got him. Well, he's 10 weeks. We got him a few days ago, so he's approaching on 11. And you know, and we yeah, and his name's Momos, you know. And Momos is like a super energetic kitty, like little kitten. I posted a picture of him, me holding him, he's super tiny, on Substack. And yeah, so yeah, Momos is awesome, you know. Like, he's got zoomies like crazy, like, and it was fun. Like he got this little toy mouse, right? And he was trying to mess with it, right? And he stood up. I guess like kittens have that, man, where it's like he stood up to where he almost looked like a monkey, where he's standing up on his hind legs and he's just straight up and just messing with this thing. I was like, dude, like that's insane, man. Wow. Yeah, he did. For a second, I was like, is he look, his tail curled up. I was like, to help him balance. I was like, dude, you're like a little monkey, you know. So, he's good, you know. Um, I've got doing, businesses kind of. My business is fluid right now. A lot of changes. You know, I don't want to say good and bad. Really, it's just challenges, right? I've long since stopped. Saying I try not to use language like good and bad. Rarely are things good and bad, you know. Like there are good and bad things in the world, but most of the time it's either annoyances or challenges, or they're just they're either difficult or they're exciting. It's really about it. I try not to put a lot of moral value language into and we do that a lot as people, right? It's like you might do that to yourself where you say, um, you look back on a decision you made, you say, "Oh, I made the wrong decision." It's like, well, maybe, not morally wrong, but you made the best. You made a decision at the time based on whatever you based it on, you know. So it's like, oh, I took that job and that was the wrong decision. I should have taken this job. And it's like, well, you don't know how that would have turned out. And, that would have had challenges just like anything else, So um I'm walking more and I'm working out more. I'm feeling good, So um things are good. I can't complain, you know. Um yeah, like anything else, it's tough. There's challenges and then there's, things that are exciting. I I'm I will say this, like I like it because the challenges that are before me are like I'm excited to meet them. So that's great. You know, I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't feel, you know, a lot of people. We had to do a GoFundMe for my mom, um, but a lot of people stepped up and donated. It was very helpful. It was awesome. It was one of the reasons we were able to get her a kitten. So that was like super helpful. So anybody here who's donated, man, much love. You guys are awesome. I'm definitely humbled and touched by it. Oh yeah, she's good there, Morgan. Like she's in a facility and it's good. Um, like she's struggling with it. Just part of her condition, and it's really unfamiliar. So, but they say that takes about a month or two, and then it kind of evens out. But yeah, you know, like there's times she'll refer to me as her son Frederic, but then there's like in the same conversation she'll think I'm her brother Don. So, you know, um, but yeah, you know, yeah. Well, I mean, we all have a lot of burden, Morgan. I mean, it's just part of the human condition, So, I mean, it's just that is what it is. You just carry forth, you know, and yeah, you try to do your best. You know, you do what you can when you can. You just keep carrying forth, and that's it. Like a big thing I believe in, um, besides, the phrase know thyself, which, is I mean, really, that's just like, knowing what you're about and do you like it? Is it something you can live with, right? Um, and yeah, oh yeah, you definitely acknowledge it. I think I've learned to do that more these days, and I do that through just giving myself grace. I used to be super, super hard on myself where I was just like, "Oh, I gotta do this or I gotta do that." It's like, and no, I never did enough. You know, I gotta keep doing more. I gotta keep doing more and just burn me out, because then the problem is you keep setting the bar higher and higher and higher. And eventually you can't reach it. And then you beat yourself up for not reaching it. And then you just start spiraling in it. Or at least I would. And then you crash. And so now, I'm just like, I see, how I'm feeling today or whatever, like I got up today. I had things I had to get done and I had things that I wanted to get done. I got up about 4:30 this morning, which I love waking up early. I've always been kind of an early riser. Um, and, aviation just pretty much like, was like made that easier, So, um, I was pretty much done by 2 o'clock of everything I wanted to get done. I was like, cool, and I could have done more, but I was like, nah, I've done enough today. I'm gonna chill, you know. I wasn't even really planning on, doing this, but I was just like, man, I just want to talk about something esoteric. See what I can do with this, I apologize if I was rambling all over the place. I'm just trying to put all this stuff together. My brain was, I woke up from a nap, and it was just like phew, all these neurons were firing. I think it was because I was talking to a friend about philosophy class, and we were making a bunch of jokes before when we were in college, you know, and you know, it's like, man, I was not the best student, and both from writing and just I had too much class clown in me, so I feel bad for my professors. I was kind of a jackass, you know. I remember one professor, Dr. McAvoy at ETSU, said, "You're very loquacious." I was like, "Well, thank you." She's like, "Do you know what that means?" I was like, "Yes, ma'am, I do." It's like, and she says, you know, she says, "Do you know the connotation that I'm using it in?" And I was like, "I do." I said, she goes, "Okay." And I said, because I knew she was kind of ribbing me, and I was just like, I said, I said, "I do." And I earned it. She laughed. We actually became pretty decent friends like that. You know, she's an interesting person. I remember one day I was standing out in the hall, and this was at like, it was funny because we kind of reached like a little detente after that. It's like, because I think that was her nice way of saying, "Yo, can you just shut the hell up so I can teach this class a little bit? Friggin' chittering, with all your blah." It's like, okay, I got it. I got you, doc. I'll calm down. You know, you know. I remember one day, you know, uh, I was in the hall and she came up to me and she sees me. She points. She's like, "You." I said, I was like, "Uh oh." I said, I think I had something smart to say. I was like, "Hey, I promise I wrote that paper by myself. I'm too broke to pay somebody else to do it." And she said, "No, it's not about that." I said, "Okay." She said, she's like, she goes, "You seem to be, you're more of the, straight American type of man." I was like, "Yeah, you could say that." She says, "Why are straight American men just so terrified when gay men hit on them?" And I was with two of my friends, right? And it was, and they're looking at me. I was like, "Whoo!" I was like, "You just throwing heaters straight out the gate, huh?" You know. And she's like, "What?" I said, "Nothing. It's just a mixed metaphor with baseball and horse racing. Never mind." So I said, well, if I had to guess, I said, you know, I said, for most men in our society, right, we're taught to be like the pitchers of woo, as a, you know, sticking with baseball, right? Men pitch woo to women, right? So we're the initiators of said woo, right? And the women are the receivers, they're the catchers, right? So we pitch woo, they catch woo. And so when a gay guy comes up to another guy who's a straight man, and you're in this patriarchal framing, and he pitches woo to said man, you've in effect feminized him, right? You've made him the catcher. And so some men can't deal with that innately. And they get upset. I said if that's my best guess. You know, it's like she's like, huh? Does that would that upset you? I said, no. I just like to be. I just like to be invited every once in a while. Even if I'm going to decline the invite, it's just nice to be thought of. Yeah. you know. So yeah, there you go. It's like, oh yeah, I got a lot of women hated. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, yeah. I think that's what spurred. Like, anyway, that's what spurred all this stuff. It was like just my time in philosophy class and running around. You know, and you know, some of the shenanigans I got up to. But yeah, a lot of good teachers. It's pretty dope. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. You know, um, yeah. But yeah, that's all I got for y'all today. Tomorrow is gonna be Taco Tuesday. Um, you know, probably gonna be talking about all these trade deals that are not going through, and it's not looking good for old Daddy Trump. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. So yeah. But anyway, I appreciate y'all being here. I hope you got something out of that. You know, even if it was just a little. I did the weave. I did the weave. That's what I did. You know. Well, he actually didn't they withdraw his name for like uh I think they withdrew his name, didn't they? Which no, it was the Peace Prize that he wants for some reason. Bro, you can't bomb Iran and then be like, like, uh, are you? Oh, okay. You from like Victorian, as in from Victoria, Texas? Dig it. I had burrito tacos today. They call them like, you know, uh, like quesadilla tacos, but I'm just like, what? Yeah. I was like, it was a good place, but it was geared towards white folks, you know? Yeah. Like, that's it's like a beef. It's real good, you know. You dip it and all. But it was geared towards white folks because it was like I saw the little open bar and it was like hot, and I was like okay, I was like I tried it. And I was like, hey, it wasn't no heat to it. I was like, this ain't no caliente, big dog. You know. Yeah, I remember, man. I run around New Mexico, so I get the good chilies, like all that good stuff, man. And I'm up here just like, mm. This was better than Chipotle, but it was like just it was for like white folks that want to be adventurous. I'm just like, it was good though. I'm not gonna lie. The burrito was good. Uh, and like the broth, the beef broth was good. Really, really good. It's like, but the heat, nah. You could tell it was. I mean, the sauce is great. It was great, but they're like hot. I'm like, where? It's 84 degrees outside, and that was hotter. So, but I digress. It ain't made for me. You know what I mean? So there you go. Yeah. Oh, chili rojo, I'll take that. Well, I'll take that. I like you. You talk my language now. That's good stuff. You know, it's like we kind of mix. We roam. It's the weave. You know, that's what you get when you get alive with you know, Frederic Poag, aka Big Country. It's just gonna, and you don't know where it's going to end up. You know, like like yeah. So, but anyway, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you very much, and I will definitely see you tomorrow. Y'all have a good one. Oh, keep the faith, defend democracy, and I'm trying out another one. Stay woke and don't fall for the okey doke. All right, I'll see y'all later.